People have often asked me why I go to Guatemala. And as many of you know, or some of you don't know, for me in 2005, I went to Guatemala to consult for a client. And my wife had sent a suitcase with me filled with dolls and toys and things for kids and said, honey, when you get to Guatemala, there's all kinds of orphanages there. I want you to drop off this suitcase. I went to Guatemala and I asked for help after our meetings if someone could take me to an orphanage, and they did. But it really wasn't an orphanage. What it was a house in Guatemala City that was home of Mama Carol, as we affectionately call her. She's a lady that had been working for a charity in Guatemala and seen the plight of little girls begging on the streets and asking for money for food, and it broke her heart. So she started taking in these little girls, and by the time I met her 4 years later, she had 22 little girls living in this one house. So I dropped off the suitcase, and I was going to leave it there, but she insisted that I come in and meet the girls, which I did. I joked that it's one of the biggest mistakes in my life because I met all these little girls, and she asked me to give out the gifts. And I did. And it was quite something to see little children squealing, little girls squealing at receiving a gift of sunglasses or receiving a little doll or a coloring book, crayons. And I inquired with Mama Carol about this, and she said, well, Dan, some of these little girls have never had a crayon or a coloring book in their life. I said, what's about the sunglasses? And she said, well, who wears sunglasses? I said, everybody wears sunglasses. No, not in Guatemala. Really, the only people that wear sunglasses are the people in the magazines, movie stars. So she said, you have just made all these little girls movie stars. They wouldn't even take the tags off. Well, it was not life-changing at that point, but when she took me through the house and began to talk to me about their stories, I was horrified. Absolutely horrified. I had never even dreamed at some of the situations that these little girls had been involved in, trafficking, and 6 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old. I won't even go into the details, but you can imagine. And I flew home, talked to my wife, and it was heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. The story goes back 35 years prior, where my father had come in on a Saturday morning, sat at the edge of my bed, and shared a dream one day of building an orphanage for children. He was going to sell his company. I asked him what he was going to do. He said, well, I'm going to start another company. He had one of the 5th largest electrical companies in Western Canada. And he said, we're going to start a new company, call it J.R. Loney and Son. My dad's name was James Ralph Loney. And then he said, what we're going to do, son, is we're going to start an orphanage for kids. So, and they got up and walked away. It was the strangest thing. Well, within 12 months of that conversation, my father's corporate airplane crashed into a mountain. He was killed, and everybody on board was killed. And I sat on a cliff in Tawasin overlooking the ferries where we lived, and I vowed to build that orphanage in memory of my father. Very naive, not knowing how to do it or what to do, but I vowed to do that. Shared with my wife on our wedding day that was one of the goals in my life, and now 35 years later, there was an opportunity to do something. So I flew back to Guatemala, met with Mama Carol, and I said to her, Mama Carol, my wife and I have decided to come alongside you and help you with building your dream of an orphanage. And she had tears in her eyes, and she said, Dan, I'm so thankful that you've decided to help me with the James Project. Well, she named it the James Project after a scripture in the Bible that says true religion is taking care of widows and orphans in their distress. What she didn't know is my dad's name was James. So, all these years later, there now is a 15-acre site, 3 hours south of Guatemala City, and we have 80 to 100 kids. We now have 12, 15 boys, and the rest are all girls. By the way, there's over 20,000 homeless children in Guatemala, and the needs are great there. But it's a wonderful project, and what has happened was life-changing for me. Now, over the years, over 200 people from British Columbia have come down to Guatemala with me to see the project there. And I jokingly, people would ask me, what are you doing in Guatemala all the time? And this segment is, what's Dan doing? Well, Dan has just gone to Guatemala. And of these 200 people that have gone down with me, one of them is with me here today, and that's Amy. And Amy works for Lonely Leadership. She's actually our manager of business initiatives and runs Lonely Leadership, which is a consulting company. And Amy, this was your first time, your first trip to Guatemala. What was that experience like?
It was an incredible experience. Definitely life-changing, and something that I will remember for the rest of my life.
I guess, were there any surprises when you went down? You don't know what to expect, and I always give you the little speech, everybody that's gone, that I can't script this journey because I don't know what you're going to see, I don't know what you're going to experience. Is there any experiences that stuck out in your mind that you came back with that you won't forget?
Yes, there were a few of those. I did hear a lot of stories before going there, so I kind of was mentally prepared for a lot of it in some sense, especially because I grew up in a developing country. And
which is where? From where?
It's from Romania, in Europe. So when I was born, my country had just come out of communism, so it was pretty rough. In that sense, it didn't surprise me that much, but things that did really impact me were just the kids. Some of them, you could see the pain. Like, they didn't even have to say anything, but you could see the pain and the trauma that they've been through in their eyes. Like, they just have beautiful faces, beautiful kids, but just those looks in their eyes, it just broke my heart. And there were several times when we were doing activities with the kids, and I was just trying to swallow back the tears because it was just so hard to see them and not burst into tears.
So, was that overall a negative experience, or do you think in the end it was a positive experience?
It was very positive in the sense that you could see the transformation in the kids and the hope that they have in this orphanage, in this kids' home. It's easy to get stuck mentally on the trauma and the abuse that they've been through. But as the director of the orphanage right now, as she says, like, you need to look at the transformation, at the hope that these kids have by going to the orphanage and having their lives changed and being fed, being protected, being given security, something that they don't have outside of that home.
Well, I'm thinking of Bob Dylan's latest book, Decade by Decade, where he wrote the number one need of a child in the first decade of their life is safety.
That's right.
And I think that's what we're providing there, is a safe environment for those children. Now, on that note, did you feel safe in Guatemala? Guatemala is rated in the top 3 most corrupt countries in the world, but did you feel safe traveling in Guatemala City and to the orphanage and that?
Yes, overall there wasn't really a concern. I mean, there were crazy drivers on the road, but we had an amazing driver, so that was great. We walked around the city on the first night, and it was interesting to see just like police or guards around. But then I just realized that they were there just to enforce the peace. But yeah, overall it definitely felt safe.
And the hotel was safe? How was
Yes.
the hotel? And
Yeah, we did stay at the Clarion Suites, and the hotel was great. We had breakfast buffets on the first and the last morning that we were there, and yeah, it was a great experience in that sense.
so exactly wasn't a suffering missions trip or anything
No.
like that.
Definitely not.
No. And when we stayed at the project, the James Project, how were the facilities there and the food there?
Yeah, the food was great. We got to taste some tortillas with bean spread, which is it's like the staple meal for Guatemala. But it was very tasty, actually. They did lots of meals that were also Western foods that we are accustomed to. So overall, it was very tasty.
Now, it was a short trip. I think generally when we go on these trips, I take people down there. We generally fly it. We have 1 day flying, whether it's a Thursday, and then we're there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And We also went to Casaloni and visited the youth center there run by
Yes.
Luis and Dora Gilbert and saw what's going on there. What was your experience like there?
That was a very interesting experience, and especially to learn that most people in Guatemala, they have an average education of second grade. Most, I would say, are illiterate, and just the work that they do in teaching these kids to read is pretty amazing. Just taking care of the kids while their parents are off at coffee plantation picking beans. Like, it's pretty fascinating.
Now, the final stop on the trip was we went to Antigua, not the island, but the town of Antigua in Guatemala. It's really the pearl of tourism. I know it was a little bit rainy that day, but what did you think of Antigua?
I loved Antigua. It was so pretty, although it was rainy, but it really made me think of Italy, what Italy would probably looks like, and you did confirm that that's exactly what it looks like. It's a very pretty city. The buildings, how they're laid out, and the flowers in the windows. And we had dinner at a restaurant there, and the food was exquisite. It was actually so good, and everybody on the team that took this trip was just amazed with the food. He did a fantastic job.
And some of the people on this last group were actually returnees, had been there
Right.
before. So.
Yes.
It's a wonderful experience. Do you think you'll go back at some point?
For sure.
Okay, well, just wanted to give your listeners a little bit of idea what it's like, and I've had many clients and friends over the years go down to Guatemala with me, and many ask to go down, and I just thought we would give you an overview what the experience is like. So if you're interested in going, we're thinking of the next trip's going to be April. First week of April. April's a great time to go. It's culturally very exciting in Guatemala with, they call it Holy Week, but it's more like Holy Month. It's a whole part of their culture and all the pageantry and everything that goes on there. But looking to April next year, if you think this might be of interest to you, drop us a line, an email, and we'll send you more information. And we would love to have you on one of these trips and experience my Guatemala. I call it my Guatemala because it's my friends and people and our children down there that there's really good things happening. So thanks for listening to this. If you want more information, feel free to connect with us.